don't forget to send us a WhatsApp message to 0809 4440981. At least we are streaming live on our YouTube platform.
www.youtube.com/smooth981fm.
Okay, jumping into our first story for this morning, Ugo Dre, it's somber news. There's been yet another attack. Premium Times reports that 14 people have been killed in a fresh Plateau attack. Now, this confirmation is coming out from the caretaker chairman of the Riom local government area. They did confirm the attack to the news agency over the phone, and as of yet, they're not entirely sure what's caused this new spate of attacks. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, that was very upsetting. Nobody still knows who are the guys that perpetrated this evil attack, and this is not the first time. This also happened, I think, sometime in earlier in the year, maybe June, July, or something, where scores of people were also killed, over 100 people. So, excuse me, what I don't get is why this village and its environs or the local government, why this local government, why did they keep attacking this local government? Back then in June, July,
Yes.
I think they were accusing headsmen of doing this. So we don't know if it's the same. And no, why Jaws? I mean, like, this is supposed to be a peaceful town. Why so much violence over the last few years? It just doesn't stop. And the state government doesn't seem to know what to do. They just can't stop. Security agencies there seem helpless.
Absolutely.
So this guy's just walking, carry guns and just shoot. So the last time this happened, the PDP called this a genocide, and it's beginning to look like
It is the spread of arms in certain areas across the country.
Yeah, I mean, we've heard stories of the Troll country with arms, and we've seen those many that got into the country and got into the states. Besides, guys, they don't get caught, do they? Right? We haven't seen them get caught. So these guns is probably the same guns that they've had, or they probably recycled. But the key thing is why is it just so easy, right, to just pick up a gun in a country where owning gun is not illegal?
Yes.
Right? You just pick up a community and just start to sporadically shoot people, drive out easily. And then you just don't, I mean, like, you see it, on TV probably once in a while, and then you probably rogue murder. It just happens all the time. Like, it happened in this same community, happened early this, something around July or so, and then now again, and then nobody has been caught. Like, so is there some kind of genocide or ethnic cleansing going on here? So nobody really knows. And now it's just still out. We don't. This is a headsman issue, or maybe just community clashes. I was watching something on social media. I don't know if it's true, if it's confirmed, but doing viral. People they're dragging out from the water, right?
Yes.
From like bodies in it. The same community. I'm like, yeah, in the same country.
It's very, very worrying. So thank you very much, Ugo Dre. At Lagos, do continue to send in your thoughts to us on WhatsApp and on Twitter. Just use that hashtag freshlypressed981 while you're up on Twitter. Up next, Ms. Ireti, let's talk about education in this country. Students, according to the Vanguard newspaper, are calling for a 26% budget allocation to education. Now, this is a requirement that has sort of been approved by the United Nations Education, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, and it's something that has been talked about globally for a while. However, when we look back over our history, the percentage that's been allocated to education has always fallen, sadly, way below that. 7% is what it was appointed to education this year. In 2014, it was 10.63%. In 2013, it was 10.12%. If anything, we're seeing a decline.
It's always, yes. It's so the United Nations actually did. They recommended that in order for Nigeria and any country to actually properly invest in her education system, she needs to allocate 26% of their budget. We've never been able to do that for reasons best known to our lawmakers, who clearly, obviously don't care. But what I do like about this story is we often hear this from the teaching bodies, etc., etc. This is coming from the students, and they are the stakeholders. They are the owners. They are the custodians of this. They are the ones that need it the most. And so this is very good. And they've actually They're actually suing the government to court. I love this whole new thing where, patrons, owners, and are coming out and saying, look, this is my legal right.
Yes.
This is my basic human right. You have a responsibility to me. Because you're not delivering on that responsibility, I am going to sue you to court so you can come and explain yourself. Because clearly, it's not about collecting money. It's not about suing. It's about suing to say, look, explain yourself and make sure to get some sort of redress, make sure it doesn't happen again. So I'd read very quickly what what's his name, the head of the ambassadors to Salihuddin Lukman of the NON's president said.
The National Union of Nigerian
That's
Students.
the one. He said also the inability of our dear nation to fund education properly, at least with 26% budgetary allocation, as recommended by UNESCO, has reduced our institutions to mere glorified secondary schools where students only attend to gain or upgrade ideas instead of learning a profession. Now, incidentally, I need to correct him. You don't learn a profession in university. You gain an education. It's when you go out that you learn a profession. But it goes on and says, in addition, the poor welfare package and lack of respect for agreements signed with various student unions in our tertiary institutions by government at all levels also dimmed the zeal of our lecturers to give their best in training young professionals. You're supposed to prepare young people to be professionals at university. So actually, I hate to say this, his statement, that quote I just read, that actually it signifies, is evident of part of the problems that's going on in our education system. And it goes on. And one of the things that he says that I really like is how we keep talking about the lack of security in this country, and how the government, if the government really truly want to deal with security, they need to look at it from a bottom-up approach. If you invest in education, then you have more educated young people, jobs, higher literacy, etc., and therefore crime drops. So that's, I totally agree with him. Let's see what happens. It's good. I hope they stick to it. And maybe one day, maybe just one day, our government will be
26%. Come on, very much, Mr. Ireti. Ugo Dre, I'm coming back to you to talk about the World Bank since we're talking money. The World Bank has cut Nigeria's 2018 growth forecast to 1.9%, according to the new Telegraph. Now, we're not alone in this. We've seen the forecast sort of drop in the sub-Saharan region for 2018. In general, that's from 2.7% to 3.1%. We do know that some of the sectors or the continent's biggest economies have been struggling. That's Nigeria, South Africa, and Angola. Yes, it's having a knock-on effect. But can you explain a little bit what this means for us?
In a nutshell, this is bad, and this basically follows the forecast of the IMF. They also forecasted that our GDP growth rate will be slow.
Yes.
So look at it this way: imagine economies like Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa, China, Turkey. They're expected to grow at a faster pace than more matured economies like the US, the UK, Germany. Okay. So, and that's because there's still a lot of sectors that are still opening up. So economic activity is supposed to be growing at a faster rate, or supposed to be rampant. But that's not what's happening now. Rather, things are slowing, and then you're seeing bigger, more robust countries like the US growing at 3-4%, and you're like, what is going on? Yeah, so
topsy-turvy.
Exactly. So if our GDP growth rate is at this kind of slow pace, then it means that a lot of us can get better jobs. As much as we want to. The unemployment rate is probably going to continue to be higher. Youth unemployment rate is going to worsen. So people out there who are in universities, who are about getting out of school, probably won't get jobs. So if you're into business, you're into growth, it's just so it means that in a lot of capital expenditure, so you can't expand your business. So it's really bad. And then foreign investors who will all love to country because you're just small. Why do I have to come into Nigeria with all the wahala that you have in here, yet your GDP growth rate is less than 2%, is forecasted to be less than 2%?
And very
when I
interesting.
can get 4% in the US.
Rose even reminds us that the CBN forecast is even lower. It's actually 1.75, both the World Bank and the IMF.
In fact,
which is
the
interesting.
CBN also said that. I
Yes.
mean, if we continue, in this trend, because they also contributed to
What?
move my head back into a recession. So it's all dire result. It's not good. It's not good for us. Not good for the economy. We don't want to be in this kind of position. Even a 6-7% GDP growth rate does not even guarantee jobs. In fact, when we had this kind of growth rate earlier, I think in the era of Goodluck Jonathan, people complained that so much growth, but it's growth that is not creating jobs.
Absolutely.
So now you're not even seeing that growth at all.
But very quickly, any comment on that vis-a-vis population growth? Because we're barely staying ahead of that.
Exactly, and that makes it really worse, because you typically, if you're growing, I think Nigeria is said to be growing about 5% annually in population growth, so that's incredibly high. Wow. So if you're growing at 5% annually and your GDP growth rate is less than 2%, then you're just in so much trouble. So you got to pity the generation that we have now, and that's why a lot of young people, some of them have looked at this thing like, what's the point staying in this country?
Canada.
You can't get good health, you can't get good education. I mean, if you get out of school, you can't get a good job. Let me just go to Canada and grab the washing plates or do whatever it is there. Yeah.
We just need to shift our perspective.
Yeah, so it's all dire, man.
Ugo Dre, thank you very much for that. But there are opportunities somewhere. And very interesting, I don't know if some people will look at this as hopeful. I don't know if is it positive, Mr. Ireti? Our next story is from the Punch newspaper. I will resign if the Supreme Court finds INEC culpable on the Osun governor poll. This is what the resident electoral commissioner in Osun State, Mr. Olusegun Agbaje, has vowed. He says, listen, my colleagues and myself, we did our very best to remain neutral, and we didn't give any undue advantage to one contestant over another. But you know what? If INEC is found guilty by the Supreme Court in our conduct, then I will resign my position. But everyone is free to seek redress at the petition tribunal. Mr. Ireti, your thoughts on this?
Well, my thoughts is very interesting. So I like his bravado or his honesty. It depends on how you look at it. Because on one hand,
how it plays out.
And how it plays out. Because on one hand, it could be bravado, and on the other hand, it could be that he's being totally honest and he's sure that he didn't do anything dodgy, so to speak. Bagam. Now, what will happen when they get to court? I don't know. I keep saying that, and I have to keep saying this. I don't know enough about the opposition, the other guy, the guy that won, Oyedepo. Oyetola, thank you. Odisi, I can't even remember his name. I don't know enough about Oyetola to be able to actually have, enough sort of opinion. Enough opinion. Exactly, enough opinion about him. Although I did see him looking like, the sort of victim of Aregbesola being dangled about on top of the bus, and I'm thinking, God, these two old geriatrics are going to drop down any moment. But thank God they didn't. Now, going back to Osun, it's the thing in Nigeria is often people, the opposite party, the party that loses, are never happy. They're never happy about what happens. Nobody, and in the case of Osun, even more so, because I had to have a rerun, and I always thought that 1,000 was such an odd number, such a round figure. That how could it be so precise? And it wasn't like 1,001 or 936. It was 1,000, and now. APC is now. If we draw parallels with what's happening, okay. What's his name? Ambode. Bolen Consimo. We're not boying anymore. Ambode lost Folu's face right now. Gosh, where's the camera?
YouTube.
You should zoom in. Right. So Ambode probably became the first governor to only do one term in this current democratic dispensation that we've had in Lagos State in the last 16, 18 years. Okay, that's actually important. Number two is, as of the time when they were doing the vote, remember the NWC, the National Workers, whatever they're called, they were, and this is the thing, these custodians, these people who speak with two mouths, they actually cause more problems than the politicians, honestly. Because at one point they were saying, as of the time the primaries was going on, and when people were actually voting, they were saying, look, these primaries are not, valid.
They're not
because
authentic.
they're not authentic. Thank you. We're not there. Nobody's giving us. And next thing you know, he's the one that's announcing that Babajide Sanwo-Olu has won. The same person. And I thought, how do you go from 0 to 100 within the space of hours? It doesn't make sense. Makes sense rather. And then Abomo then comes out and says, the same person that he called a crook, a criminal, and a mental patient now says, oh, I endorse him, can all my people get behind him? Sorry, sir, did you cure him overnight?
Says it's about the party, but thank you very much for that, Miss Ireti. We do have to move on very quickly to our next story.
To our next story. This one comes to you, Ugo Dre. CBN gives reasons for external reserves fall. And, the story goes like this. The CBN of Nigeria has given reasons for the nation's external reserves, which currently stands at $44 billion, or having been on a downward trend lately. Also, the Director of Corporate Communications at the Apex Bank, that's Mr. Isaac Okorafor, explained that the external reserves have been going down recently because of high yields in the United States. So what do you think about this?
Why do I get all the negative stuff?
Because I planted them like that.
Like external reserves falling. People like what is going on?
Don't take my inheritance, please.
That's what it feels like. It feels like every election cycle we get things. So please explain to us.
Please, Lagos, I ain't Dr. Doom. Okay, so like in following stories, earlier this for the Iran dollar, all exchange and all. Extent, but external reserves is padded with a lot of foreign portfolio inflows, padded with debt as well. Some of the Euro bonds that were collected were all in that external reserve figure, so it wasn't really organic. So that was a bit like the complaint, what some critics are saying, and that's beginning to pan out. So currently, at $44 billion, we've lost about $4 billion in external reserves in the last 3 to 4 months. So why is this happening? This is happening because, just like CBN has rightly said, there's been a lot of pullout from emerging markets. I spoke earlier when I said that in the U.S. economy, for example, they're growing at about 4%, and in the United States, they've also basically increased their interest rate, their own version of NPR. So their own version of NPR is about 2-point-something percent, I think 2.7, I hope I'm not mistaken, percent. So what that means is that in the past, you could just borrow from the U.S. government at 0%. And just move that money to emerging markets and lend and invest there at maybe 12% return,
and still make profits.
and still make money and then go back. But now that interest rate has gone up in the US, so it's a bit of a disincentive to invest in emerging markets where you have currency risk. So these guys are looking at it like, look, man, let me just take this money back to the US. I'm going to place it at a higher margin there, because if official US interest rates are 2-point-something percent, then you can invest there at a higher yield. So that's what's happening, and they're moving out, and that's why countries like Argentina are in trouble, Brazil. And look at this stat, for example. Argentina has lost 134% according to them, even though that looks bizarre. Brazil 34%, Turkey 78%. It has been stable, and we don't understand why. And even though oil prices are dropping, oil prices are going up, but volume of production is dropping.
Okay, thank you very much for that one. Mr. Ireti, coming to you with this one. Buhari calls Leah Sharibu's mother. He vows to rescue abducted schoolgirl, and this comes from the Daily Times. And basically, that's just the story.
Yeah, what are your thoughts, Mr. Ireti?
Well, yes, my thoughts are, look, it's about time. I'm glad the people of Nigeria didn't allow this story to die, but let's remember, and I'm glad he's called the mother. It's important, and it mustn't just be a one-off call. They must actually keep in touch with her and make it regular. But very quickly, can we just remember, I didn't even know this, it's only in this story that we find out that it wasn't just Leah that didn't come back. There's a young boy that didn't come back either. Our boys are just as important as our girls, so let's start campaigning for that boy to come back as well.
Okay, thank you very much for that one. Let's we'll get to the next one. This one comes to you, Ugo Dre, and this one is from this day newspaper. Minimum wage negotiations setbacks. Mr. Ireti, so let's come to you with that one. What do you think? It may first suffer further setbacks, despite the fact that we just mentioned that oil prices have gone up.
It is an Ugo Dre story from this day newspaper about minimum wage.
Okay, so I can take any story.
Let me give you the background to it. The tripartite negotiation of a national minimum wage may experience more delays because for the 2009 Well, do you think with the elections coming, it would, make
This was always going to be a very tough negotiation. A lot of us don't really see the government being able to afford any new minimum wage at the moment. So I don't know how they're going to pull this off. I don't see how you can, increase minimum wage without labor giving up something. So there's probably going to be some kind of restructuring. So are they going to reduce the workers? Are they ready to allow that to happen? Are they ready for us to exactly? Are they ready to
Current minimum wage, most of them are not.
No, exactly. So
They're
you're not
not.
a lot of states can't even. I mean, those are at least the federal government can't pay, but the states can't even afford it. But I mean, the way minimum wage works is that when you introduce that, the states take their own time to now start to implement. But then, can we just afford a minimum wage without civil service reforms? And you remember the Oronsai report is still there. I mean, that was an incredible report that was done in the Jonathan era. And after it was done and he submitted it, it's in the cooler. Nobody has got the guts to implement it. No government. I mean, we thought that Buhari was going to do it in his first time, but I mean, Buhari is more socialist in his thinking.
Yeah.
So obviously he wasn't going to do it. But that has to happen. So you can't just increase minimum wage without some kind of civil service reforms.
But the thing is it possible to increase on a batch by batch level? Start from the barest minimum, which is 18,000, and do it across board over a period of, say, maybe 5? Is that possible?
Yeah, some people have mooted that, right? So just maybe like you can even do inflation linked, minimum wage increase. So we don't have to do this all the time. So whenever inflation goes up or whatever, some metrics in the economy changes, then you can just trigger wage increase. But you know what? You can't do it without civil service reforms. The civil service we have today is actually very inefficient, and a lot of people think it's very bloated.
And over bloated,
right? And
it's too
duplicated. So
expensive.
you have to do that across the board reduction. And of course, even the cost of governance is also too high. So politicians earn a lot of money. So there's got to be widespread reform. So if you do that, then of course you can start to push for, you can have better. It's just the same thing a regular company would do, right? So
Exactly.
your workers want a higher salary. So what you're going to do, you probably downsize a little bit, and then increase salaries, and then you expect productivity to increase so that you can make a lot more money. That's basically what needs to happen. So it's going to be a very, very tough negotiation. I won't be surprised if we see another general strike in the next few months.
Thank you very much for that one. Okay, final story. We're coming to you with this one, Miss Ireti. Army jails 2 soldiers 10 years for abduction. This comes from the Guardian newspaper. And, they're saying that they're guilty for alleged violation of human rights in Borno State and sentenced them to 10 years imprisonment.
Okay, first and foremost, when somebody's been found guilty, it's no longer alleged. Can we stop this nonsense? Right. They have been found guilty. So, they have been found guilty of abducting Alhaji Hassan on November 19th, 2017 at his residence because apparently they believed him to be a sponsor of Boko Haram. So they kidnapped him, they barged into his home, kidnapped him, asked for ransom. He begged for 1 million, they demanded 3 million. He begged to pay 1 million. He did pay 1 million. Now they've been caught and they've been sentenced to jail. So it is no longer alleged. It's not an allegation
yes,
anymore.
they're
They've
found
been found
guilty.
guilty, and I'm glad they're in jail because it needs to stop. But apparently, at the very bottom of the story, it says it was learnt that the General Court Martial in Maiduguri had imprisoned a number of soldiers for various offenses. So this is good. I think this is good to, they need to
hold
hold to
accountable.
account.
The public
Yes,
needs to
and
see it happen.
yes, they need to see it happen.
But they weren't
So-
dismissed though. I was hoping to see that.
Well, if you go to jail, what happens? I think what happens is after you've done your jail
what they
time,
did
then
was
there will
that
be
they demoted them.
there will be these people, they're not being demoted. They've been sentenced to charge of extortion from the victim. You are hereby sentenced to 5 years in prison, respectively. The service some of the jail shall run concurrently. So what is then? They then get thrown out. They've been found guilty, and they go to jail.
Yes, we're going to keep an eye on that.
And jail
That's
is the
very
worst
interesting.
place. The worst people to go to jail are members of the
Security,
forces. Yes.
Well, thank you very much. We've got several messages that have come through, so let's see if we can get through a couple of them. MI from Akoka sends this one. The curious case of that particular local government, it keeps recurring like decimals across different administrations, talking about Riom local government area. He went on to say that the proliferation of arms cannot be discussed without talking about sponsors and enablers that aid this pervasiveness.
Yep.
This one says, we're tired of all these political news. They manifesto since 1999. If this is one chance, reports more on what the government is doing.
To better our lives. Well, that's what we're trying to do as well. We've got more still coming in. Chibuna sends in this WhatsApp message to say if we can't organize ourselves to vote new leaders, that's politicians with selfish interest, manage our economy, care for our people, educate them, provide jobs that enable them to earn an income to live, then maybe it's time to outsource our nation's
I'm
leadership.
telling you, people have talked about that.
On wages, Big T sends in this message.
He says we can pay it, reduce the waste, reduce the corruption, focus on diversification, and reduce pay for our politicians, and the monies will appear.
Easier said.
I was gonna say it always sounds so easy when people say do this, do that, but then as you pointed out, are we going to see a bit more perhaps in mass strikes if they really do go ahead and try to cut down the size of government?
Exactly.
I think very quickly is that it's not that it's not easy. You have to be willing to want to do it. It's not that it's impossible to do, and it's actually not
tough.
that hard. It's not that hard. The reason, very quickly, what makes it hard is you've got to go back to the same legislatures and say to them, please, we need you to reduce your salary. If somebody comes to you and say, Ugo Dre, oh yeah, reduce your salary, you're going to answer them. It's the same devil that we've got to go to complain about Satan.
Well,
that's the problem. That's what makes it hard. It's not impossible.
Let's also note, though, that whenever these strike stories come out, the general public seem to get behind it for whatever reason, whether it's getting rid of subsidy and whatever the issue is. It's always seemed rather easy to whip the policy into a certain
That's
type
why
of
it's called
sentiment.
populist decision.
Exactly, I agree. But if you're talking
Populist
about the unions, the actions of the unions is separate to talking about whether we can actually reduce
not even
the
the
cost.
unions.
Strike action. The fact is, what you have is you have weak unionists in Nigeria. If we didn't have weak unionists, they should be. If they stood and stopped collecting money after the show, do you understand? Then half of these things wouldn't repeat itself. The problem we have in Nigeria is the unionists, the head of the national union, etc., etc. They go behind the backs of their members and they start negotiating for themselves. That's the problem. No, it's not impossible. Let's stop making that like Nigeria is incredibly unique.
I don't like
People
unions,
can't
Ireti.
be.
Yeah,
I don't like them either. No, I'm not saying I do. I'm not saying that. That's my point. Where you have real union leaders, they are not going to betray their followers or their members rather than followers.
All
They would focus on the issue at hand.
Thank
They
you
don't in Nigeria.
very much. On that note, we are done for this morning. Please continue the conversation up on social media at Sisioge Lagos, at Ugo Dre. Those are their handles. Coming up next at 8:15, we will be talking entertainment inside of the grapevine. Keep listening to Smooth Breakfast.